Hello and welcome to another episode of the Royal Record here on GB News, your weekly podcast bringing you the latest news and analysis from the royal family. I'm Cameron Walker, GB News' Royal Correspondent.
And I'm Svar Nanan-Sen, Royal Editor of gbnews.com. You can get in touch and let us know your thoughts on anything we discussed this week by using the hashtag GBN Royal Record or emailing us at royal@gbnews.uk.
That's right, and we've got a lot coming up for you on today's episode, including, is there really a feud between King Charles and his brother Prince Andrew over the lease of Royal Lodge?
And we'll be bringing you the results of our GB News membership poll into whether King Charles should slow down following Queen Camilla's latest health update.
But before that, earlier we spoke to India McTaggart. She is the royal correspondent of the Daily Telegraph. She was with Prince William yesterday, who was in Cardiff, tackling or championing an issue he really cares about, seaweed. Take a listen. Yesterday, Prince William was in Cardiff championing a cause he really cares about, and it's all to do with seaweed and how it can be used by companies around the world to be more sustainable. And somebody who was with Prince William yesterday was royal correspondent at the Daily Telegraph, India McTaggart. India, welcome to the Royal Record on GB News.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. So, first of all, for those of you, for our viewers and listeners, going on a royal engagement, what is it actually kind of like shadowing Prince William all day?
Yeah, it effectively just entails trailing behind them or in front of them, running in front of them, trying to sort of anticipate where they're going to go next, trying to pick up on the conversations that they have with people, trying to capture footage for the Royal Rota. It's a weird kind of stalkerish process, but it's great because you get a great level of access and you're able to hear what they're talking about and what they're championing.
And I think what we saw from Prince William yesterday is a real passion for the subject. We've seen a lot of his Earthshot Prize over the last few years, finding solutions to repair the planet over the next decade. But seaweed's a particular interest of his. Tell us more.
He loves his seaweed. Yeah, it's brilliant. I honestly think watch this space with him because yesterday was very much billed as a fact-finding day. It was sort of him really meeting a load of businesses that have various different production or various different stage of seaweed extraction and farming, or maybe they've made it into a product already. So there was sort of seaweed snacks, there was seaweed pet food, seaweed fertilizer, seaweed farming. So it was a whole range. And of course there was Nopla, which is the Earthshot 2022 winner, one of them. And Nopla is one of sort of the favoured seaweed companies because it's so successful. They've made all this sustainable packaging from seaweed. They're now providing 7 out of 20 Premier League teams with the packaging that they have. They are hugely successful. So they were there as well. So it was sort of him learning from all of them, learning about the process and what they might need, and also just trying to get more investment into the sector. Because I think that's really the big point, is that we need extraction plants in the UK for seaweed. We need, manufacturing. We need everything to be scaled up, and we need sort of more money to go into it for it to become a really viable solution to single-use plastics or other things that are sort of harming the environment. So it was very much a fact-finding day, but you could see how interested he was. He even grabbed a few business cards. Like, he's very keen. He's like, okay, I want to know more about this. And
away from the seaweed, there was actually a really interesting story that came out during the engagement about why William doesn't play golf anymore.
Yes. So he was talking to Pierre, who's the co-founder of Nopla, and they were catching up, and William was seeing all the new products that they have at the company, and one of them was a golf tee made of seaweed. And William picked it up and said, "Oh, you're making golf tees now?" And Pierre said, "Yes, do you play golf?" And William sort of pointed at his forehead and said, "No, look at this. No, I don't play golf. Don't ask me what this is." It's from a golf club. And we know in 1991, he was hit over the head accidentally by a fellow school pupil with a golf club. And he had a fracture to his skull and had to get stitches. So it's kind of his, it's been dubbed the Harry Potter scar.
And can you imagine the moment of panic the classmate would have felt after hitting the future
and,
king with a golf club?
And the Royal Protection Officers. And then he was rushed from a Berkshire hospital to Great Ormond Street with Princess Diana in the ambulance with him. Like, it was serious stuff.
It was a really serious injury at the time. And yeah, clearly, I mean, he has a permanent scar from it. So it was quite, it would have been very scary to see that people, but it was accidental. So.
Yeah, sometimes serious injuries make you look cool though, with the scar on your face. Something to talk about, clearly, with the golf tee made of seaweed.
And clearly it's put him off playing for life.
Mm-hmm. So. Absolutely. A phrase that Prince William always uses is tangible impacts, like something that can be actually measured. And you mentioned Prince William's kind of level of detail when it comes to sustainability and climate change. How much do you think he has read up on these kind of companies or solutions?
Genuinely a huge amount. He's really knowledgeable in this area. And I think it's been one of his tangible interests. It's been one of his sort of impact points. He really wants to make a difference in this area. And I think, of course, Earthshot is doing that by finding all these different companies that, might be, they're from all over the world. They might not be known. And by spotlighting them and giving them this prize and giving them this opportunity to share what they're doing to help the environment. And I think everyone you speak to, like when we were in Singapore for the 2023 prize, every company you speak to mentions the level of detail that the Prince is aware of when he speaks to them. He knows exactly what's going on. He's really involved in the detail with all of this, especially with Notpla as well. Yeah. I mean, Pierre's been on a number of engagements with him now. And he's very, very keen always to be updated. And I think, this is just going to be a particular interest for him, a particular point for him going forward, I think.
Because you got to speak to Prince William in Singapore, didn't you? You asked him
some questions.
Yes,
on behalf of the Rota. Yeah, I got to ask him some questions about what he wanted to change as the Prince of Wales, how he was going to redefine the role. His father had it for so many years, how he was going to take it on and make it his own. And he mentioned that, he mentioned that his family had done a brilliant job spotlighting various different causes, which of course they have. There's nothing like royal convening power. But that he really wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of like fewer issues, but really make them his own and really make a difference in them. So I think that is going to be his legacy. He's chosen particular fields. We know homelessness is one of them. We know obviously the environment's one of them, mental health, environment, anti-poaching. So he's going into these particular fields and he's really tailoring his engagements, his visits around them. And I think it's going into much more detail about certain things. I mean, the level of detail about seaweed yesterday was unbelievable. A lot of it can't go into the copy because we only have a limited amount of space to talk about things. But I mean, the amount of questions, and he was going just to everyone and I mean, really just having in-depth conversations about it for extended periods of time. So you can really see the passion actually about it all. He was so excited. He was trying the seaweed snacks and he was talking about, what kind of flavors he would want. And he was like picking up the fertilizer and being like, how does this, getting them to explain all this, like really, it's a complex process, all of that. But
we'll watch this space.
Watch the seaweed space.
And we are expecting to see Prince William on Saturday taking part in the King's Birthday Parade, trooping the colour. But it's the Irish Guards trooping their colour this year. But we think maybe with the absence of their Colonel, the Princess of Wales.
Of course, yes, the Princess was absent for the Colonel's review, which was asked the weekend before the rehearsal. I think there's no expectation of her to go to any of these engagements at the moment. She's still recovering. She's still undergoing cancer treatment. And I think the public have been absolutely amazing, and the press even in sort of respecting that request for privacy. And of course, we've been, very much asked not to speculate about these kinds of things. What I will say is, I think for trooping, it would sort of present, if you were weighing it up from a sort of PR perspective, it would represent quite a low pressure way to maybe show her support for the king. And, it could just be a balcony appearance if she wanted to. And of course, they did make clear at the very beginning when they announced that she was undergoing preventative cancer treatment, they said, she may in the future decide to do various jobs, various engagements, various visits without it being a return to work. So I think it is possible that she goes and she does that. And it's, it's not considered a comeback. It's not considered a return to work because, she still wants that time, understandably. But I think it could be a way, a low pressure way for her to.
You touched on there that it's from a PR perspective, it could be a way in for Kate. But is there a risk having not taken the royal salute with the at the Colonel's Review, that appearing on the balcony 1 week after would appear a bit of a snub to the Irish Guards?
So I see what you're saying, but I think it's important to make clear how different those two things are. Appearing on the balcony with the rest of the royal family and her children for a few minutes is completely different expectation-wise and also stamina-wise to taking the salute for the Irish Guards, because that is, I mean, it's quite a long process. You're inspecting all the soldiers, you're standing for quite an extended period of time, and you are also completely the focus of that engagement. So I think in terms of her wanting privacy, and just discounting whether, she's well enough or whatever, whether she wants to, but just her wanting that privacy, it's very different, her appearing with all of them and sort of not being the focal point, and then standing for over an hour and inspecting different soldiers and being alone at a military engagement, which is already probably not her, most comfortable zone. It's not like her early years engagements where she's surrounded by children and she's really in her like happy place,
And we did see Kate write a really heartfelt letter to the Irish Guards apologising for missing
exactly,
the
of course. It's not that something that she, probably took that decision lightly. I think that was, well thought out, and she would have really weighed things up, I imagine. And it was lovely to see that she wrote that letter. Exactly.
You talked about the focal point there, and I suppose the main focal point of the day is that it is the King's official birthday. Of course, he himself undergoing cancer treatments, and he's taken a very different approach to perhaps the Princess of Wales, kind of persevering, carrying on. I suppose if he appears on the Her Royal Highness appears on the balcony alongside the King, do you think it would be, what do you think the symbol would be of that image on the balcony?
I think, trooping in that balcony image, that is the sort of snapshot of the year for the royals. That is the time capsule of what the royals were like for that year. So I think it's amazing and important in that way to get that snapshot, which is why it would be great if she was there for that appearance. And I think it would be a show of support for him on his official birthday parade. But as you mentioned, they have taken very different approaches. And of course, they've got very different duties, right? I mean, of course, there's the royal duty in general, but he has constitutional duties that she doesn't. So I think his approach to it has been very much, as monarch, I need to be seen to be believed. As monarch, I need to carry out my constitutional duties, even if I'm not carrying out public-facing engagements, So I think that has to be taken into account as well. But of course, it would be a lovely image if all of them were together. It would be wonderful.
And what I also thought was lovely, a few weeks ago at the garden party hosted by Prince William, he rallied around the younger troops, the Princess Beatrice, Eugenie, and Zara and Mike. Do you think perhaps we'll see them?
I think it wouldn't be accurate probably to say that they were changing the working royal dynamic. I think the working royals currently as they stand are going to stay that way. But do I think that they will step up? The extended family will step up when needed? Yes. And they did that with the Queen as well. We saw that. We saw them attending these kinds of events with the Queen too. So it's not completely unheard of. But what's so nice is that William has such great relationships with them. And there's, especially with Mike, there's so much banter and it's sort of like a different energy.
One pint Willie.
So it's sort of like it brings this younger dynamic, and it was great to see him with them. And I mean, it just looks, a lot of fun.
I bet it does. And earlier this week, there was a slight incident involving the first official portrait of King Charles III since the coronation, where there was a bit of a demonstration with animal rising, wasn't there? Just a little bit. Tell us about how the king morphed into an animated character.
Well, you know what? Maybe I'll say something controversial about this, because I usually find these art targeted protests really annoying, because I just think luckily they don't destroy them because there's glass casing, but I'm like, don't target such important pieces of work. I think you can make your point in other ways, and I just don't think it endears them to the average person. But then again, I suppose, this one, again, it wasn't damaged because they put Wallace face over the King and over the glass protecting the painting. And then they put a speech bubble next to it, talking about the RSPCA, no cheese.
No cheese, Gromit, look at all this cruelty on RSPCA farms.
Yeah, so it relates back. So the reason why I'm not that angry at this one is because so it relates back to a study they released in March, Animal Rising, the group that did this. They're sort of a vegan group, and they're, of course, protesting against animal cruelty and the sort of conditions of animals in farms across the country. And they released this study saying that RSPCA stamped assured farms are actually not passing DEFRA standards. And they had all this evidence. And the king is, of course, patron of RSPCA, and he likes Wallace and Gromit. And so that was the tie-in. So it's not just like throwing soup on a Van Gogh. You know what I mean? I think it's slightly more thought out in a way.
Well, they're obviously anything involving the royal family is going to make such a massive PR publicity. There's going to be a lot of interest in it. And they're kind of calling on the king to disregard the RSPCA because, as you say, he's the patron. They wanted him to do something about it. But of course, Buckingham Palace aren't going to comment on something like this. I suspect it's because they don't want to give it oxygen and publicity.
No, and the RSPCA has had royal patrons going back all the way to 1840 when Queen Victoria was their first patron. And that's how they actually got the royal in their name from when Queen Victoria was their patron. So the charity and the organisation has deep links to the royal family.
Yeah, going back years, I'm sure. And I just think it's, of course, Buckingham Palace is not going to comment. But perhaps, as you said, I think it gives them maximum airtime because it's the first official portrait of the king, and it was just unveiled by him at Buckingham Palace. It just makes a statement. It doesn't damage it, thankfully. But it gets their point out there. But you were with me at the wedding last weekend, covering the
Duke of Westminster.
Yeah, the Duke of Westminster,
and
right outside their wedding at the very end, 2 Just Stop Oil protesters released canisters or fire extinguishers.
Yeah, it was like fire extinguishers of orange smoke.
Yeah, exactly. Odd. Very odd. Yeah, and they it was right as the newlywed couple walked out. And again, thank goodness it didn't cause too much of a disturbance. But I do sometimes they're just so badly timed. I mean, why would you disrupt someone's wedding? And I think also that they're so keen on sustainability, that particular couple. I mean, so much of what they do is about the environment and sustainability and the land and farming and everything like that. So I'm just like, okay, this is just... But it's a way to garner maximum publicity, isn't it?
Yeah, it was very ironic, especially because the wind direction, unfortunately, was not in Just Stop Oil's favour, and it went the other direction. And then, of course, the police very quickly apprehended them. I should just point out the RSPCA have condemned that protest against the portrait and denied that the RSPCA assured farms are cruel to animals. We get that in there.
Well, they're looking into it.
They've
launched an investigation. So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I hope, it's just one of these things that you hope that the maximum good can come out of it. And again, thank goodness nothing was actually damaged. But yeah. I suppose the point I'm trying to make is at least there was an investigation backing it up. There's a Wallace and Gromit tie that they knew that the king liked it, but I'm not supporting that at all. I just still think it's not the right way to do these things. But then I don't know because I'm not,
Well, I know. We'll let that investigation run its course.
Yeah, we'll let that investigation run its course. Exactly.
India, thank you so much for joining us here on the Royal Record.
Thanks,
So Svar, when Buckingham Palace announced the king had cancer way back in February, I did not believe that come, 4 months later in the summer, we would see the king consistently a couple of times a week on lots and lots of engagements. So for example, all the D-Day commemorations, both in Portsmouth and Normandy. He's expected to be at Trooping on Saturday. Then it's Garter Day next week. Most likely will be at Ascot as well. That's a lot of engagements for someone still continuing cancer treatment.
Yeah, I think it surprised many people just how much he's doing. You mentioned that last week he was even in France, which was his first overseas trip since being diagnosed with cancer. And Queen Camilla said something this week that was quite interesting. She provided a health update on Charles and said he's doing fine ahead of Trooping the Colour. But she did mention that he won't slow down and he won't do what he's told.
Shock.
Yeah. So off the back of that, I asked our GB News members, should King Charles slow down after Camilla's health update? So 209 members voted in the poll. 74% voted yes, Charles should slow down. 21% voted no, and 5% said they did not know. So 3/4 of our members would like to see the king take on less engagements during this period and prioritise his health. And something that I think we can also look at off the back of this poll is that support for the Princess of Wales and the approach she's taken. We haven't seen her conduct any royal engagements since December 2023, and she said during her cancer announcement that she was going to prioritise her health. Maybe our viewers would like to see Charles take a similar approach.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the difference between the King and the Princess of Wales is the speculation and the horrible conspiracy theories online are all targeting the Princess of Wales rather than the King. I think it shows that there is genuine concern for our monarch. He's clearly in his 70s. We know he's undergoing cancer treatment. King Charles, we know, because his various staff members and of course the Queen has alluded to it as well, is a bit of a workaholic. He doesn't like sitting still. He likes being seen. He likes being out and about, and he seems to have been ramping up a number of engagements. And what Buckingham Palace has always said to us when they were talking about the fact that the King would be returning to some form of public duties is that every engagement will be on doctor's advice if the doctors give the green light. And there has been adaptations made. So, for example, with the D-Day commemorations last week, he only appeared for half of the Portsmouth commemorations. He also only appeared for the British commemoration in Normandy, so he didn't go to the international one. Prince William represented him on his behalf. Equally, on Saturday, he will be in a carriage during Trooping the Colour. He won't be riding a horse. So adaptations are being made, and I think what we need to do is perhaps trust doctors' advice. But I think what's interesting, Svar, and you brought this up, is the Queen saying he's not doing what he's told. So does that suggest that the doctors are advising him to slow down and he's not doing so?
I think that's a really good point, Cameron, because we are being briefed that Charles is advised by doctors ahead of every single engagement. But with what Camilla said, and he's not doing what he's told, I don't know what else she could have meant by that other than maybe doctors are saying, you could give this particular engagement a miss, or we saw Prince William step up for him last week, and maybe a member of the royal family could take it on. But I think Charles has just got such an appetite to be out and about and to be the face of the royal family that maybe his enthusiasm is getting in the way of him following doctor's advice.
And when he wasn't out and about, his nephew, Peter Phillips, said he was really frustrated he wasn't out and about. I remember on his first engagement, I think it was his first engagement at the Macmillan Cancer Hospital in central London, which I was at. The relief I saw with my own eyes when he got out the car and saw all the media and saw the hospital staff. He was clearly just so excited to be back. And I think he spoke about he's finally been allowed out of his cage. So I think there is a genuine appetite for work from the King still. He's clearly made a commitment. He's sworn an oath to serve his whole life, whether it be long or short, similar to the late Queen, as every monarch does in this country. And I think we just perhaps maybe just need to take his word for it. If he feels well enough, he can do it. So I think if there was a genuine issue and really strong doctor's advice, I suspect he would listen to it. But who knows, because clearly it's his own personal medical information, and he does have a right to privacy on that.
Yeah. And another thing that Charles has been in the news for this week is his feud with Prince Andrew over the Royal Lodge.
The infamous Royal Lodge.
Yes, so...
Must be nice having a 30-room, 7-bedroom mansion.
Yeah, it's easy for some. But King Charles wants Prince Andrew to move out of the Royal Lodge and move into Frogmore Cottage, which obviously was Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's old base in the UK. Situation is complicated by the fact Prince Andrew has a 75-year lease agreement for the Royal Lodge, which he signed in 2003.
Yeah. But that lease agreement is with the Crown Estate, it's not with King Charles, which leaves King Charles with a bit of a difficult situation because he can't evict his brother because it's the Crown Estate, it's not him.
Yes, and the agreement is valid until 2078, so there's a long way to go on it. Sarah Ferguson appeared on ITV this week and actually confirmed that the feud is ongoing. She described it as life in the fast lane, and we've actually got the audio to listen to Sarah's exact comments on this.
It's not a Debbie Downer. It's life in the fast lane. I'm a guest for a start. I'm a very lucky guest and a very comfortable guest. Thank you very much. But I tend not to get involved in brothers' discussions, and I think that's the most safe place to be. Is let the brothers discuss it between themselves, and that's where I keep like that.
So that was Sarah, Duchess of York, on ITV's Good Morning Britain earlier this week. She certainly alluded to the fact there were certainly conversations happening between Prince Andrew and his brother, the King. I think the issue is we've got King Charles's lease agreement, according to the Times, says that he has to maintain the property and make sure it's in a good standard to live in. Clearly, it's going to be very expensive to pay the rent on it. It's thought to be £260,000 a year. Where's he getting the 260 grand a year from? Because he's not a working member of the royal family, so he's not getting any money from a sovereign grant. We believe he may have got some kind of inheritance from the late Queen, but it's not thought to be very much. And he has a very modest naval pension as well. The rest of it is at the moment being funded by King Charles. Charles, therefore, controls the purse strings. And because Royal Lodge is not in the guarded perimeter of Windsor Castle, it means it needs its own separate security, which when Andrew was forced to step back as a working member of the royal family, he lost. Pretty similar to Harry. Police don't protect him. So King Charles pays out of his own pocket to secure his brother, to keep his brother safe. And it needs guards around the Royal Lodge perimeter. So in King Charles's view and the Crown Estate's view, it's more efficient, it's more cost effective if the ageing Prince Andrew moves from Royal Lodge to the smaller Frogmore Cottage. But is that going to hurt Prince Andrew's pride?
Yeah, I think it could be argued that Charles just sees it as a cost-cutting exercise, especially with the fact that the Royal Lodge currently it needs its own security. But if Andrew is within the Windsor perimeter, he obviously would then just be protected by the security that's already in place.
Exactly.
One report this week that discussed a possible motivation for why Andrew is holding out is the fact that he sees the Royal Lodge as part of Beatrice and Eugenie's inheritance. So the lease has got another 54 years on it to go. Andrew is 64. And so there is very much the possibility that at some point it could pass on to his daughters.
Yeah, I mean, Prince Andrew is, I think we can safely say, is pretty stubborn. And if you just think about Prince Andrew's life, this is the guy who was born into the royal family as the spare. He was the spare to King Charles' heir. And then slowly but surely over the decades, he's been depleted. He was the naval hero in the Falklands War, welcomed back with open arms, rumoured to be Queen Elizabeth II's favourite son. Then Prince William's born. He moves further down the line of succession. He accepts freebie flights from his rich friends. He then is nicknamed Air Miles Andy by the press. He then gets a friendship with a convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein, which clearly then unravelled with the Newsnight interview and all the rest of it. Strong allegations against Prince Andrew, all of which he denies, but he was forced to step back as a working member of the royal family. So going from almost the top of British society to where he is now, almost a recluse in this massive mansion, which may be falling apart at the seams, depending on which way you look at it, clearly must have had a huge effect on Prince Andrew. So is this Prince Andrew's way of trying to hold on desperately to the last thing that gives him status, rather than being demoted yet again to a really small cottage, which used to be lived in by Harry and Meghan, done up to Harry and Meghan's Californian tastes on the Windsor Castle estate? So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this one plays out. You go to the Princess Eugenie and Beatrice point. Those two, I think, are perhaps in a lot of favour with the working royals at the moment. We saw both sisters support their cousin Prince William at the garden party recently. They both do their own separate charity work. Princess Eugenie championing World Oceans Day this week on her Instagram page, for example. Princess Beatrice helping out with a youth charity in New York. They're doing a charity kind of abseiling down the Empire State Building. She did an interview on ITV, her first live interview. So their profile's going up. They're also have full-time jobs themselves. They have their own income. They've got 2 very wealthy husbands and their own family. I don't think they need Royal Lodge or want Royal Lodge. And then, will Prince and Princess of Wales eventually move in? Who knows?
Yeah, it's a really good point that Beatrice and Eugenie are very independent. They live their own lives. Eugenie also spends a lot of time in Portugal. It's difficult to see whether they would want to be dragged into this feud around the Royal Lodge, or maybe it is just something that Andrew feels that he has to do. You mentioned that Eugenie and Beatrice are back in favour. There was a report this week that Princess Eugenie has now been removed off the royal family's blacklist, which she was originally on due to her close ties with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. We know that Eugenie was seen as one of, if not the closest member of the royal family to the Sussexes. She was the first member of the royal family that Meghan Markle was actually introduced to. So, yeah, I think being dragged into this Royal Lodge feud now is not something that either of them will want.
Yeah, and I suspect Princess Eugenie and Beatrice are going to take after their mother on this and let the 2 brothers fight it out amongst themselves. We're not getting involved. We'll see what happens. So watch this space. Let us know your thoughts on any of that. royal@gbnews.uk, or use the hashtag, GBN Royal Record. Got there in the end.
And before we go, don't forget that you can keep up to date with all the latest royal news and analysis at gbnews.com/royal, or by signing up to the Royal newsletter.
And if you've enjoyed this episode, try and give us a 5-star review if you can on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you're listening to this, wherever you're watching this on YouTube as well. Thank you very much for getting to the end of the podcast. We really, really appreciate it. Remember to send in your views. Until next time, see you next week.
Goodbye.